Hello and welcome to All About Community. My name is Robert L. Harris and I am your host. Wow, this year has started with a bang. Not a good bang, but a bad bang. Where on January 6th, led by the President of the United States of America, an insurrection. My. What a damnable thing. But, of course, that was to be expected from a man called Trump, which I am glad he is no longer with us. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. Today we're going to talk about the city of Oakland. And I have as my guest Dr. Eleanor Mason Ramsey, who conducted a study which we will discuss.
Okay.
Dr. Ramsey, welcome to All About Community.
Good morning, and thank you.
And let's talk a little bit about your background. Where were you born and educated? I know you weren't born in California, were you?
No, I was not.
And where were you born?
I was born in New York City,
Ooh,
or
the
as
apple.
Eddie Murphy said, I was born in Queens, the commonplace.
All right,
Yes.
all right. And you grew up there, educated there?
Yes, I went to public schools in New York City, in Queens, a town called Jamaica, New York. And I attended high school in Jamaica, and then I went to Hunter College in New York City, where I graduated.
Yeah, Hunter College.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And I believe you have a PhD or something like that?
Yeah, some form of that. Yes, I left New York and came to California. I'm really fascinated by the level of political fervor that existed in the mid-'60s. And I was admitted to the University of California, where I got a PhD in anthropology. And it was consistent with my dad's instructions that you need to get an education and no one could take that from you.
Hey, that's exactly what my parents told me.
Yes.
And they were absolutely correct.
Yes.
And I just have to say this, that you have three brothers, all three of whom are members of Kappa Alpha Psi. That makes
I
you
knew.
very, very special. But
Thank
there's
you.
something else special about you, is the fact that your late husband, Henry Ramsey, the famous Henry Ramsey, was one of my law professors when I was in law school.
Okay.
In fact, he taught me criminal law.
All right.
At that time, he was the only black on the faculty
Yes.
at UC Berkeley.
Correct.
But anyway, I'm not going to talk about all of that. You are currently in business, is that correct?
That is incorrect.
And what is the name of your business?
Mason Tillman Associates Limited.
And what do you do?
I study the disparities in the policies of government and focused on business disparities as well as employment disparities. And it's our business to understand what the business is of government and their use of people of color and women in their award of contracts and in the employment that they do as a governmental entity and what they require of their contractors once they receive a contract, who they employ. And those are the areas in which our focus has been.
And you've done studies for various entities across the nation?
Yes. We did our first study in 1990 for the county of Maricopa, which is where Phoenix is located in Arizona. And since then, we've done 145 studies around the country.
145. Wow.
Yes, we've done about 30% of all the studies that have been done since the Supreme Court in January 1989 issued a decision that said if a local government wanted to have a program to address disparities, that they would have to first document that they had a statistically
So-called
Croson studies. Yes, that was a Croson decision that the Supreme Court issued. And from that time on, any government that wanted to correct its disparities, they had to do a study. And so we did the first one in Arizona. And since then, we've done 12, 15 state studies, New York City, Texas amongst the state studies. We've done New York City's, City of New York. We've done work in Miami and Florida, throughout maybe half dozen different cities in Florida. And we are currently doing work in Houston, doing work for the New York City Port Authority.
And I understand that you recently completed a study right here in this great city of Oakland.
Yes,
is that
indeed.
Correct?
That is correct, yes.
All right. And when was that study completed?
That study was submitted to the city in February 2020.
And what years did it cover?
It covered 2011 to 2016.
2011 to 2016. Now, let's talk about some of the findings of that particular study. What did it find? Just in general, then we'll get in more specifically later, but
well,
a summary of what it found.
The summary of what it found is, and it's important to note that we studied 4 of their industries. So we studied the award of construction contracts, professional services, which included architectural and engineering and other technical areas where technical training was required, and the goods and services. So we studied all 4 of those, and our findings were that in all of those areas, at the award of prime contracts and the subcontracts awarded by those primes, that African Americans were underutilized at a level that was deemed to be discriminatory in nature. All other ethnic groups were underutilized in some or of those industries, but African Americans had the status of being discriminated against in all of the industries at prime and sub level.
We have to go to break, but we're going to pick up on that particular note in a moment. African Americans were underutilized. I'm just going to say it differently. They didn't get any business from the city of Oakland. So don't touch that remote. We will be right back with All About Community. Again, my name is Robert L. Harris, and I am your host.
Hi, I'm Kathy Adams, president of the Oakland African American Chamber of Commerce. African American owned businesses in Oakland, California collectively are an essential pillar of the overall business community, providing jobs and vital resources in a variety of consumer and professional services. OAACC is committed to our members who keep our city going with business tax revenue and household income they provide to families. The impact of COVID-19 health pandemic has created a vulnerable environment that has drastically affected many of our businesses. Therefore, OAACC Foundation created the COVID-19 Resiliency Relief Program to provide grants for our Black-owned businesses that are unable to qualify for federal funds. We are committed to raising $1 million to provide the funding of these grants. Visit oaacc.org. Donate now. Please do not let our Black-owned businesses close. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to All About Community. Again, my name is Robert L. Harris, and I am your host. When we went to break, I was speaking with Dr. Eleanor Mason Ramsey, who is an expert in this area. So, Eleanor, you were telling me about the underutilization, and I phrased it a little differently, the underutilization of African Americans in terms of doing business. Now, let's explain that more.
Well, the city awards, the city awarded almost $500 million in contracts.
$500 million?
Yes, and over that 5-year period. And African Americans represent about 15% of the businesses that are available, based in Oakland, interested in doing business with the city of Oakland.
They represent, let me get it right,
about 15%. Right.
That were available.
Available to do business with the city of Oakland. And they received less than that across all of the industries that we studied. Well, it ranged anywhere from 0.5% in some industries to 5 or 6% in others.
0.5%?
Right, yes.
That's unbelievable.
Right, it is. It's very notable. And it occurred in areas where there's some interesting phenomena, because there's such a common belief that the African American businesses and other businesses of color lack the ability to do contracting, and that's why they're underutilized. But there's some interesting observations that came out of this study, where we looked at the issue of preference, and we are in a state where the state constitution says, as a result of Proposition 209 that we're all familiar with, that you should not give preference. And so in our examination, we sought to see if preference was being given. We know that there were no provisions for there to be goals for the use of minority or women-owned businesses, but we sought to see if there was any evidence that preferences had been given. And so we looked at types of contracts. One type of contract is where the city is called an on-call contract. And for construction and professional services, particularly design services for architecture and engineering, you get pre-qualified. And so we studied that, and we determined that African Americans in fact got pre-qualified, but the selection of vendors from the pre-qualified list was determined by the managers. And so even though you were pre-qualified, all things are equal now, no issues of differences in capacity, they still didn't get pulled off the list to be used.
So what I'm getting from that is that white contractors are being given a preference.
Yes, indeed.
And why is that?
Well, if you take if you take the example provided, this is an option for the manager to decide who out of the pool of pre-qualified firms will he select. And he selects the white firms. He does not select the African American firms. And there is no issue of capacity.
So that's like white privilege, is that
yes,
right?
and preference.
Like as I started, when I opened this program on January 6th, it just seems to me there was a perception that because those were white people and not Black Lives Matter people invading the Capitol, that there was a preference that, hey, no problem here, let them in.
Exactly.
Why is that mentality there?
Probably it's a reflection of our history, which we like to think of and often spoken of as something of the past, but very much a part of the current environment, where in the case of governmental contracts, managers are extraordinarily powerful. They decide who gets the invitation to even submit a bid or proposal, although it is supposed to be widely distributed. That is often a factor. They compose the selection panels if it is a decision to be made by selection of qualifications, and they decide who goes on that panel. They then decide how they get ranked. And at the end of the day, they make a recommendation to a city council, as in the case of Oakland, and there's a continued use of the same vendors and a continued willingness to award to the same vendors. But there is a great deal to be attributed to the power of the managers.
So they prefer the same vendors over and over.
Right.
And I hate to say this, but it's true, and I believe in telling the truth. But many of those are people, they're friends that they know, they've been doing business with, they become comfortable doing business with, and therefore they automatically select them. Whereas if a Black person appears, well, I don't know, and they find out 100 reasons why they should not select that Black person.
Right. It's called a preferred vendor. That in the sort of colloquial expression is it's a preferred vendor. That's the one we're comfortable with. We know what he's going to do. We like them. And that happens repeatedly. So the significant number of contracts that we studied were given to a very small number of vendors without regard to color. So you're using a very few vendors, even a very few white vendors, and you are clearly not using the minority vendors, and African Americans are getting the least of all of the minority groups.
So the poor Black person who wants to do business with the city of Oakland, a city where Black folks pay hundreds of thousands, actually hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes to, can't even get a contract.
Right.
Is that?
And keep in mind too, and not being able to get a contract, we're not talking about the contract that builds the connection between the BART to airport. We're talking about also at $50,000 and less. The majority of the contracts that are awarded are small contracts. And so we're talking about a small contract to sell staples or to sell chairs or to sell bottles of water. to do catering. So it's a full array of the goods and services that the city
And these
awards.
are contracts that really could help sustain African American businesses, but they can't get that business. And on that note, we are going to have to take another break. I hate to, but we have to. And we're talking with Dr. Eleanor Mason Ramsey, who conducted a study in the city of Oakland and made some amazing findings. Don't touch that remote. We will be right back. All about community.
Positive Links Day program is a community center that provides disability awareness to remove some of the stigmas associated with the disabled population. We are located at 675 Hagenberger Road, Suite 255 in Oakland, California. Our mission is to be a voice for those that don't have a voice. We are recruiting community volunteers for training to assist us to develop and provide awareness for the treatment available for the disabled community. If you would like to volunteer, you can reach us at 510-878-9779.
Hi, we're Minuteman Press Oakland in downtown Oakland at 2406 Webster. We're your local printer. We help your business grow. We provide flyers, business cards, direct mail, any product that you need to promote your business, we have it. And remember, at Minuteman Press, no job is too small and no job is too big. Come by, stop at our shop at 24th and Webster, right behind the YMCA in downtown Oakland.
Hello and welcome back to All About Community. Again, my name is Robert L. Harris and I am your host. When we went to break again, we were talking with Dr. Eleanor Ramsey, who has done a study for the city of Oakland. And Eleanor, we were talking about some of the problems in the selection process. Could we expand a little bit more on that and why, especially, these decision makers continue to do what they do, that is essentially excluding blacks?
I think it's systemic. It happens across the city, across the departments, and I think it exhibits people's preference, and their preference, which is race-driven and not just preference for type of business or type of service, but race is a factor when they exert that preference.
So it has really nothing to do with whether or not the person is qualified to do business, but more about a person's race. They look at a black face and say that person is incompetent, whereas they look at a white face and they say, oh, yeah, they can do it.
Right. Yeah, and there's so many measures that we were able to review that revealed that. Another area that revealed it is the city has, after the last study, this is the third study, so it's almost been since three studies, yes, and the first was done in the mid-90s, so the findings are the same. They have persisted over these many years, and one of the things that happened at the end of the last study is the city did not move forward to do race specific goals, which would have set aside, which would have sheltered some contracts so that you could be assured that you could correct the disparity. They put in place instead a more rigorous local small business program. And so they have that program in place, but we found even under that program, again, where the businesses all get pre-qualified, African Americans represent about 16% of the businesses that have pre-qualified to be to benefit from that program. And still, there is a disparity. Using less than 1% of those businesses, business went to local small businesses that were owned by African Americans. So you can look at various practices, and it's just consistent across the city.
Now, how would you remedy that?
Well, I think there are a number of things. One, I think you're going to have contracts which you shelter and put in a program in which African Americans can be assured of being on a list to get a contract, but you are controlling who gets the next contract by having it rotational and not based on the manager's choice. That's one of the ways that can be addressed. Another way to address that is to simply say to this, establish as a policy that 1% of all contracts are going to be awarded to African Americans and other ethnic groups.
Well, why haven't we done that, and why don't we do that?
There seems to be a position that says that because of Proposition 209, that you cannot correct. Now, Proposition 209 did, in fact, as a result of it being part of a constitutional amendment, said that you cannot give a preference. And it is my observation and the findings that there is a preference being given, but it's not to minorities, it's to white males. And so I think that the facts exist for the city to proceed to establish a program that will gear to correcting this documented disparity that African Americans, Hispanics, Asian Americans, and Caucasian females and Native Americans have all experienced at one degree or another.
So help me understand this. Proposition 209 says you can't give a preference, but yet a preference is clearly being given
yes.
not to blacks,
That's correct.
but to white.
Yes.
Why is that white privilege so pervasive?
It is throughout all of the work that we've done around the nation. It is consistent. And the one group that in every community has had a disparity have been African Americans. In most communities, Asians and Hispanics also have a disparity, but the consistency across the country is that heritage that says that blacks are not preferred and that it is in fact reflected in the decisions that are being made. And the statistics bear it out. So we're no longer just left with what we think and what we feel, but the numbers tell the story of what is happening in this community and in others.
And this is, again, it's a community where millions of dollars are being paid in taxpayer money that is being given to others rather than to help our African American businesses. And Dr. Ramsey, that ain't right. But we're gonna have to go to a break. Don't touch that remote. We will be right back with All About Community.
Sinclair Miller Medical Association, founded in 1968 by Dr. William Sinclair and Dr. Rudolph Miller. The organization was formed to improve the health care of African American and other minority people in the Bay Area. Sinclair Miller Medical Association offers annual scholarships to high school, nursing, and medical students who are African American. Presently, Sinclair Miller Medical Association has over 160 members. Sinclair Miller maintains its commitment towards the betterment of the field of health, education, and welfare. For more information about Sinclair Miller and scholarships, contact Sinclair Miller today at 510-863-4560 or visit our website at www.sinclairmiller.org.
Hello and welcome back to All About Community. Again, my name is Robert L. Harris and I am your host. When we went to break again, I was talking about we were talking about some of the disparities right here in the city of Oakland that have been revealed through the study conducted by Dr. Eleanor Ramsey. But in the final segment here, Dr. Ramsey, I'd like to talk about some of the obstacles that are put up front to try to prevent blacks from qualifying. For example, insurance requirements and stuff like that. Can you talk about some of that?
Yeah, the insurance requirements actually with government contracting, City of Oakland, like all other governments, is a requirement for the prime contractor. And the prime contractor, yes, so the prime contractor has that requirement, and when it comes to dealing with their subcontractors, they have a choice. They can either require insurance of them, or they could waive the insurance quality.
Well, why won't they waive it if it's already been required of the prime? They're covered, aren't they?
Well, there's an expression called the FBI. For the FBI, they do waive it. Friends, brothers, and in-laws. So they do get waived.
Now, FBI, friends, brothers, and in-laws.
Yes. So it's a choice of the prime as to whether or not they do it.
No, that ain't right.
Correct.
Well, how do they get away with that?
Because it's
what are our city council people doing?
That is a question
they ought
to be asked.
Thrown out. No.
We need to address that.
So, that's a political issue. So
yes,
the Oakland African American Chamber of Commerce should be addressing that.
Yes, I would agree.
Because that's an important point there.
Yes. And I think to the credit, the African American Chamber of Commerce was instrumental in getting the city to actually release the study. The city received the study in February, and it wasn't released until this summer. And it was only after the African American Chamber of Commerce had a press conference in which it raised the issue. And the study was released during the time of the press conference.
Now I can see why they didn't want your study released.
Right.
They want to keep the stuff under the rug,
Yes.
which is clearly not right. There is a real problem here that needs to be and must be addressed by the city of Oakland. You indicated the first study I believe was back in the 90s.
That's correct, yes.
And since then, you've had 1, 2, 3 studies, and it continues.
It
so
does.
It has to stop.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice to see that happen as quickly as possible, because you cannot continue, business cannot grow if you cannot share in the public coffer. Public dollars is a primary means of business for construction firms, professional services, goods and services all over the country. Government is a major source of contracting.
Absolutely, and African Americans should not be excluded from that. And we're going to talk about this fact in the next segment. We will be talking with Leah Turner from the Turner Construction Company. So that's important. Eleanor, do you have a website or anything that may be available? I understand it should be at the on the screen.
Yes, the city's has released the study, and so your viewers can go to the city's website and get a copy of the City of Oakland 2019 Disparity Study. And I encourage everyone to do that. I think it's reading that's worthwhile. There's also a section on the anecdotal experiences of businesses, which is very, very descriptive of what people actually experience as they attempt to do business. So I think it's important, and I'm so pleased that we're able to talk today about this subject, which is very much to my heart as well as others in this community.
And with that, we are going to have to end the program on that particular note, Dr. Ramsey. And thank you for all of the work that you have done and continue to do right here in the city of Oakland and across the nation to point out some of these disparities that we encounter. And that's so important to African American businesses and how successful they are.
Yes.
Again, we're going to end this segment and thank Dr. Ramsey for her outstanding appearance. Thank you very much.
All right. Ramsey. Thank you.